Hey everyone, welcome back. Ready to explore a city that's more than just a myth.
Uruk. Right. It's a place that I think shatters a lot of what people think they know about ancient cities.
It really does. And we've got some fascinating excerpts that'll take us straight to the heart of Uruk, a city that was a powerhouse of culture and tech way before its time.
What gets me is we're not just talking about some ruins here. This is the birthplace of urban life as we know it.
Yeah, and that's what I think is so mind-blowing. Imagine, right, a time before megacities like we see today. No London, no New York, no Tokyo.
Nothing.
And then boom, there's Uruk in 3100 BC, potentially the biggest city on the entire planet.
Up to 90,000 people, they estimate, in that whole area.
That's massive for that time period.
I mean, that's just incredible. A genuine metropolis.
Yeah.
Bustling, I bet, full of activity and trade and all sorts of new ideas.
Absolutely. And it wasn't content with just being a big city. Uruk was a trendsetter. They had this thing called the Uruk expansion, spreading their culture, their way of life all over the place.
Yeah, it was like they were the influencer of their day. Their urban planning, their culture, it took off, really shaped the entire region.
So what do you think made Uruk so powerful? Location must have been a factor, right?
Oh, for sure. Uruk was right in the sweet spot. Southern Mesopotamia, on the Euphrates River. That river was a lifeline back then.
Like the ancient superhighway, the I-95 of its day.
Exactly. And get this, they also had this intricate system of canals.
Canals, really. So like Venice in the desert.
You got it. Waterways all throughout the city made trade and transportation within Uruk so much easier.
I can't even imagine what that must have looked like back then. Must have been something else.
It must have been pretty amazing. And while the Euphrates was a key to their success, it might have also played a role in Uruk's eventual decline.
How so?
Well, rivers change course over time, and keeping the land fertile was a constant battle. It's a reminder that even the mightiest cities are tied to nature.
A lesson we're still learning today, for sure. So we talk about Uruk's history, but it's not like one city, right? It's more like cities built upon cities.
Yeah, layer upon layer, like a historical layer cake. We see evidence from as far back as 5000 BC in the Eridu period, all the way to when it was abandoned around 700 AD.
Wow. A long history, for sure. And within all those layers, there are two main districts that stand out. Eanna, the district of the goddess Inanna, and Anu, the district dedicated to the sky god Anu.
Each one with its own architectural wonders. We'll get to those soon enough.
I'm already picturing those ancient temples, those ziggurats reaching for the sky. Let's start with the Anu district, shall we? What's the story there?
The Anu district is where you find the Anu ziggurat, a massive stepped platform with the white temple on top.
That's one that was covered in that shiny gypsum plaster, right?
That's the one, visible for miles. You couldn't miss it.
A real symbol of power and faith, I imagine.
Absolutely. And underneath the ziggurat, they found another temple called the Stone Temple, built with symbolic materials and then ritually destroyed.
Ritual destruction. That's fascinating. What about the Anna district? What makes it so special?
The Anna district, well, that's where we see the emergence of monumental architecture A&D writing, two major cornerstones of civilization as we know it.
Now we're talking. This is getting exciting.
It really is. We see this evolution through the temples. First, there's the stone cone temple, decorated with a colorful cone mosaic facade, probably connected to some kind of water cult.
A water cult.
Interesting.
Then there's the limestone temple. Bigger, grander, shows a shift towards using stone for their big constructions.
Makes sense. And finally, there's the red temple, built on top of where the earlier temples once stood.
Exactly. Each one grander than the last. Uruk was clearly getting more powerful, more sophisticated.
Can you imagine seeing those structures rising from the desert?
Would have been quite a sight. And then, of course, there's the birth of writing in the Eanna district.
Ah,
A revolution in communication.
those proto-cuneiform tablets. It's like we have a direct line to the past. They really are incredible. Dating back to around 3300 BC, give us so much insight into how the city worked, the economics, the administration.
And there's Kushim,
Kushim, yeah.
the oldest known name recorded in writing. Probably an accountant, keeping track of all those barley transactions.
Isn't that amazing? A name, a person from over 5,000 years ago. It really shows you the power of the written word.
Absolutely mind-blowing. It's like the roots of our modern record-keeping systems right there in Uruk.
It really highlights how even the most ancient civilizations were developing practices and systems that we still see echoes of today.
So we got these incredible temples, the invention of writing, but what was daily life actually like in Uruk? What was it like for the everyday person?
Well, apart from the big monuments, we find clues in everyday objects, like these things called beveled rim bowls.
Beveled rim bowls. What are those?
Incredibly common in Uruk. Archaeologists think they were used for rations, handing out food. Suggests a very organized social system, organized labor.
Like the ancient equivalent of a lunch pail.
Maybe. Could have been how they paid workers or distributed food.
Interesting. So even back then, they needed systems to manage all those resources, take care of the people.
Precisely. And then there's the invention of the fast potter's wheel. Changed everything for them. Mass production, standardized pottery.
Ah, so that's where the assembly line got its start.
In a way, yes. Shows you how innovative they were. Adapting, developing new technologies to meet the needs of a growing population.
So Uruk was this thriving city, a real cradle of civilization. But it didn't last forever, right? What happened?
Like all civilizations, it had its ups and downs. Uruk went through cycles of power and decline, just like the whole region. When the Akkadian Empire came along, Uruk was absorbed and things started to decline.
Empires rising and falling. It's a classic story.
It is. But Uruk didn't just vanish. It had revivals under later empires, like Ur. We see new temples being built, such as the Head Temple, which was connected to astronomy.
So even when its power was waning, Uruk still held on to its cultural and intellectual importance.
For sure. And speaking of power, let's not forget about the political side of things. We have this document called the Sumerian King List. Now, it's a mix of myth and history, but it gives us some insight into the dynasties that ruled Uruk.
Oh, I love it when myth and history mix. Always makes for a good story.
It does. The king list mentions 5 dynasties of Uruk, including some big names like Gilgamesh, the legendary king, and Lugal-Zajesi, who actually managed to unite all of Sumer for a time.
So Uruk was right in the thick of those ancient power struggles.
Absolutely. We also see the shift from temples being the centers of power to palaces. Shows how society was changing, moving away from a purely religious focus to something more centralized.
It's fascinating how these power dynamics, these social structures from so long ago, still resonate today.
They really do. Uruk gives us this incredible window into how human society evolved, from these small farming villages to complex urban centers, all those social and political hierarchies. We see the beginnings of them right there.
Makes you realize those challenges, those triumphs of civilization, they've been going on for a very long time.
And the echoes of those ancient stories, we're still hearing them today.
So much more than just Gilgamesh's city. What we see in Uruk is a real place, a city bursting with human activity and ingenuity. It's a story of resilience, creativity, and the incredible things our ancestors achieved. It's truly inspiring. What about you? What parts of Uruk's story stand out to you?
I'm curious, what captures your imagination? Is it the grand temples and ziggurats, or maybe the invention of writing, or perhaps it's the political drama, the rise and fall of empires that you find fascinating? Whatever it is, hold on to that curiosity.
Because the story of Uruk is just one chapter in the long, complex story of humanity. It's amazing to think we can piece together this much of history from a civilization that existed literally thousands of years ago.
And there's more, as we dig into our sources, even more details about this metropolis.
I was thinking about the scale of Uruk's influence, especially during what they call the Uruk expansion.
Yeah, between 4000 and 3200 BC, we really saw a major shift happening in human society. From those small villages, those agricultural settlements, to these much bigger urban centers.
And it seems like Uruk was right at the forefront of this whole thing, this transformation, leading the way in how cities were built, even in the formation of early states.
And its impact, it wasn't limited to Uruk itself. Their traders, colonists, they spread Sumerian culture and their ideas far and wide. It's like Uruk was shaping the way societies developed all across the region.
I was like, Uruk was the epicenter of this massive cultural earthquake that reshaped everything in Mesopotamia.
That's a great way to put it. But it wasn't all just about military power or conquest, right? Uruk's influence was also about trade, about economics.
Right, we talked about their canal system earlier, but I think it's worth really emphasizing just how important those waterways were.
Totally. Think about all those canals filled with boats, goods flowing in and out of the city, people coming and going, connecting Uruk to all these other places.
It's almost like a very early form of globalization. Uruk as this central hub for commerce and culture, connecting all these different places.
That's an interesting way to look at it. And all of this interconnectedness, it must have fostered so much innovation, ideas and technologies being shared back and forth.
Leading to all these new developments and advancements.
Definitely. Speaking of advancements, we have to talk more about the architecture. I mean, we briefly mentioned the Anu Ziggurat and the White Temple, but they deserve another look.
Okay, tell me more.
Well, the Anu Ziggurat, it was dedicated to Anu, the sky god, and it really shows just how skilled Uruk's engineers were. This massive platform built in steps. I mean, it took centuries to build, constantly being expanded and renovated by each generation.
It blows my mind to think of the time and effort that went into creating something that big. The resources they must have needed.
And then on top of this huge ziggurat, they built the White Temple, covered in that bright gypsum plaster. It must have been a beacon, visible from far, far away. Just a stunning display of Uruk's power, their religious devotion.
I can only imagine how people must have felt approaching this towering structure. Must have been awe-inspiring.
Breathtaking, for sure. And while the Anu Ziggurat and the White Temple are truly amazing feats of architecture, there's also the Iana district and its own incredible structures.
Right, we were talking about the sequence of temples in the Yanat district, the stone cone temple, then the limestone temple, and finally the red temple, each one showing us how Uruk evolved.
And you have to remember, these temples weren't just static buildings. They were dynamic spaces, constantly changing, adapting to the needs of the people.
They were the heart of Uruk's social and religious life, places where people gathered for rituals, ceremonies, all sorts of community events.
And it's within these very temples that we find evidence of another remarkable innovation, the birth of writing.
Right, those proto-cuneiform tablets.
Yeah.
They're like a time capsule, giving us a window into the lives and thoughts of the people who lived in Uruk.
Absolutely. And they give us so much information about the city's economic and administrative systems. Everything from accounting to legal documents, even literature, it all points to a complex and sophisticated society.
And there's Kushim, the oldest name we have in writing, an accountant meticulously recording those barley transactions. Incredible.
It really is. It just goes to show the power of writing, doesn't it? A simple inscription on a clay tablet, it survives for over 5,000 years, and it connects us to an individual from that distant past.
I get chills thinking about that. And it's not just writing. Those artifacts we find in Uruk, they tell us so much about daily life back then.
We've talked about the beveled rim bowls. Maybe they use them for rations, but there's so much more. There are all sorts of objects that shed light on Uruk's culture and their technology.
Like that invention, the fast potter's wheel, completely changed how they made pottery. Mass production, standardization.
It revolutionized the whole process. And then there's the Mask of Warka. Sometimes they call it the Lady of Uruk, or even the Sumerian Mona Lisa.
Oh, right, that carved marble face. I think it's supposed to represent Inanna, the goddess.
They think so. It's from about 3100 BC, one of the earliest representations we have of a human face. Just imagine those delicate features, that gaze looking out at us across all those centuries.
It's amazing how art can transcend time and culture like that, connect us to those who came before us.
Absolutely. You know, while we're on the subject of connections to the past, let's go back to Uruk's political landscape. That Sumerian king list, even though it's a mix of myth and history, it gives us a glimpse into who ruled Uruk.
We encounter names like Gilgamesh, the legendary king. His epic tale is still told today.
That's right. And then there's Lugal-Zaggisi, who managed to unite all of Sumer under his rule. Quite a feat.
So Uruk was playing a major role in the ancient power struggles of Mesopotamia.
Definitely. And we see this change happening, the centers of power shifting from temples to palaces. That tells us something about how their society was changing, moving away from a religious focus toward a more centralized form of government.
It's amazing how those ancient power structures and those social dynamics, how they still echo in our world today.
It's like human nature playing out across the millennia.
As we keep exploring Uruk, I think it's important to remember that this is more than just some ancient ruins, more than just some old artifacts. We're piecing together a story here, a story of human ingenuity, of ambition, of resilience.
A story that spans thousands of years and connects us to our distant past. It offers us lessons for the present and maybe even for the future.
And it's a story that's still being written as archaeologists uncover more and more about the secrets of this incredible city.
And we're going to continue to explore to learn more about Uruk's cultural legacy and how it impacted the world around it. It's incredible how much we can learn from a city that's been gone for so long, right? About ourselves, about how civilizations rise and fall.
I know, it's humbling and so inspiring. As we reach the end of our exploration, I think it's important to talk about Uruk's legacy. What impact did this city have on the world around it?
Well, we've touched on how Uruk's culture spread throughout Mesopotamia, especially during that Uruk expansion. But when we look at the specifics, what really stands out? I think it has to be writing.
Writing, huh? Yeah, makes sense. Those cuneiform tablets. Talk about a game changer.
I mean, think about it for a second. Try to imagine our world today without writing. No books, no documents, no internet.
How would we even function? It's hard to even wrap my head around that. Writing completely changed how we communicate, how we learn, how we keep track of things.
It really did. It was the foundation for so much. Literature, law, science. A world without writing, knowledge would have been so much harder to preserve and share. It would have been a completely different world.
It's mind-blowing. And Uruk was right there at the beginning of it all.
Uruk and those early scribes. And their influence didn't stop there. Their writing system spread across Mesopotamia, and it influenced later writing systems like Akkadian cuneiform.
So in a way, the legacy of those Uruk scribes is all around us. It's in every written word we see.
It's true. But beyond writing, Uruk left its mark in other ways too. Their architecture, their art, their technology, it all had a lasting impact. Think about those architectural innovations we talked about. Things like the ziggurat, the way they designed their temples. These ideas, they became hallmarks of Mesopotamian architecture, influencing building styles for centuries.
It's like they set the standard. And their art, those beautiful cylinder seals, that enigmatic mask of Worka.
Right. The detail, the skill, it shows you just how talented Uruk's artists were and how much they influenced later Mesopotamian art.
And we can't forget about the technology either. Those advancements that helped shape their world. The fast potter's wheel, for example.
That one invention, it changed the way they made pottery,
Yeah.
allowed for mass production, and it helped Uruk's economy thrive. They were able to support a much larger, more complex population.
So when we talk about Uruk's legacy, we're talking about a lot more than just a few impressive buildings or some ancient artifacts. We're talking about writing, architecture, art, technology, urban planning.
We're talking about a city that was innovative, that had a real impact on the development of Mesopotamian civilization. Their influence spread far and wide, reaching places like Egypt, even the Indus Valley.
It really makes you realize just how interconnected the ancient world was, how ideas traveled, how different cultures influenced each other.
It's a reminder that we're all connected in some way, that we're all building upon the work of those who came before us. We can learn so much from these ancient civilizations, draw inspiration from their achievements.
I agree. Exploring Uruk has been an amazing experience, a real journey of discovery. I'm just filled with gratitude.
At how resourceful and resilient those people were, how much they accomplished.
And gratitude for the opportunity to learn from them, to connect with our shared history.
You know, before we wrap up, I'd like to leave our listeners with a question. What part of Uruk's story resonates with you the most? What lessons can we learn from the rise and fall of this ancient metropolis?
How can we apply those lessons to our own lives, to the world we live in today? These are questions worth asking ourselves as we continue to learn about the past, as we search for knowledge, as we try to build a better future.
Thanks for joining us on this incredible journey. I hope you've enjoyed exploring Uruk with us. Keep questioning, keep learning, keep exploring. There's so much the past can teach us if we're open to it.
I couldn't have said it better myself. Until next time.